Chapter 6. The problem with a highly magical artifact such as the Amulet of Samarkand is that it has a distinctive, pulsating aura that attracts attention, like a naked man at a funeral. I knew that no sooner had Simon Lovelace been informed of my escapade than he would send out searchers looking for the telltale pulse, and that the longer I remained in one place, the more chance there was of something pinpointing it. The boy would not summon me until dawn, so I had several restless hours to survive first. What might the magician send after me? He was unlikely to command many other jinn of Farquhar and Jabor's strength, but he would certainly be able to whip up a host of weaker servants to join in the hunt. Ordinarily, I can dispose of foliots and the like with one claw tied behind my back. But if they arrived in large numbers, and I was weary, things might become difficult. I flew from Hampstead at top speed and took shelter under the eaves of a deserted house beside the Thames, where I preened my feathers and watched the sky. After a time, 7 small spheres of red light passed across the heavens at low altitude. When they reached the middle of the river, they split forces. 3 continued south, 2 went west, 2 east. I pressed myself deep into the shadows of the roof, but couldn't help notice the amulet giving an extra vibrant throb as the nearest questing spheres disappeared downriver. This unnerved me. Shortly afterwards, I departed to a girder halfway up a crane on the opposite bank, where they were erecting a swish riverside condo for the magical gentry. 5 silent minutes passed. The river sucked and swirled round the muddy posts of the wharf. Clouds passed over the moon. A sudden green and sickly light flared in all the windows of the deserted house on the other side of the river. Hunched shadows moved within it, searching. They found nothing. The light congealed and became a glowing mist that drifted from the windows and was blown away. Darkness shrouded the house again. I flew south at once, darting and swooping from street to street. For half the night, I continued my frantic, fugitive dance across London. The spheres were out in even greater numbers than I had feared. Evidently, more than one magician had summoned them, and appeared above me at regular intervals. To keep safe, I had to keep moving, and even then I was nearly caught twice. Once, I flew around an office block and nearly collided with a sphere coming the other way. Another came upon me as, overcome with exhaustion, I huddled in a birch tree in Green Park. On both occasions I managed to escape before reinforcements arrived. Before long, I was on my last wings. The constant drag of supporting my physical form was wearing me down and using up precious energy. So, I decided to adopt a different plan, to find a place where the amulet's pulse would be drowned out by other magical emissions. It was time to mingle with the many-headed multitude, the great unwashed. In other words, with people. I was that desperate. I flew back to the center of the city. Even at this late hour, the tourism in Trafalgar Square still flowed around the base of Nelson's Column in a gaudy tide, buying cut-price charms from the official vending booths wedged between the lines. A cacophony of magical pulses rose up from the square. It was as good a place as anywhere to hide. A bolt of feathered lightning plunged down out of the night and disappeared into the narrow space between 2 stalls. Presently, a young, sad-eyed Egyptian boy emerged and elbowed his way into the throng. He wore new blue jeans and a padded black bomber jacket over a white t-shirt, also a pair of big white trainers with laces that were constantly coming loose. He mingled with the crowd. I felt the amulet burning against my chest. At regular intervals, it sent out little waves of intense heat in double bursts, like heartbeats. I fervently hoped that this signal would now be swallowed by the auras all around. Much of the magic here was all show, no substance. The plaza was littered with licensed quacks selling minor charms and trinkets that had been approved by the authorities for common use. Wide-eyed tourists from North America and Japan eagerly probed the stacks of multicolored stones and grim-cracked jewelry, trying to recall the birth signs of their relatives back home while being patiently prompted by the cheery Cockney vendors. If it wasn't for the camera bulbs flashing, I might have been back in Karnak. Bargains were being struck, happy cries rang out. Everyone was smiling. It was a timeless tableau of gullibility and greed. But not everything in the square was trivial. Here and there, rather more sober-faced men stood at the entrances to small closed tents. Visitors were admitted to these one by one. Evidently, there were artifacts of genuine value inside, since, without exception, small watchers loitered near each booth. They came in various unobtrusive forms, pigeons mostly. I avoided going too close in case they were more perceptive than they looked. A few magicians wandered about amid the crowd. They were unlikely to be buying anything here. More probably they were doing the night shift in the government offices in Whitehall and had to come out for a breather. One, in a good suit, had an accompanying second-plane imp hopping at his heel. The others, more shabbily attired, simply trailed the telltale odor of incense, dried sweat, and candle wax. The police were present too. Several ordinary constables and a couple of hairy hatchet-faced men from the night police, keeping themselves just visible enough to prevent trouble. And all around the square, the car lights swirled, carrying ministers and other magicians from their offices in Parliament to their clubs at St. James. I was near the hub of a great wheel of power that extended over an empire, and here, with luck, I would remain undetected until I was finally summoned. Or possibly not. I had sauntered over to a particularly tatty-looking stall and was examining its fare when I had the uneasy feeling that I was being watched. I turned my head a little and scanned the crowd. An amorphous mass. I checked the plains. No hidden dangers. A bovine herd, all of it dull and human. I turned back to the stall and absently picked up a My Magic mirror, a piece of cheap glass glued into a frame of pink plastic and feebly decorated with wands, cats, and wizards' hats. There it was again! I turned my body sharply. Through a gap in the crowd, directly behind me, I could see a short, plump female magician, a bunch of kids clustered round a stand, a policeman eyeing them suspiciously. No one seemed to have the slightest interest in me, but I knew what I'd felt. Next time, I'd be ready. I made a big show of considering the mirror. "Another great gift from London, magic capital of the world," screamed the label on its back. "Made in Thai." Then the feeling came again. I swiveled quicker than a cat, and success! I caught the starers eyeball to eyeball. Two of them, a boy and a girl from within the gaggle of kids. They didn't have time to drop their gaze. The boy was mid-teens. Acne was laying siege to his face with some success. The girl was younger, but her eyes were cold and hard. I gazed back. What did I care? They were human. They couldn't see what I was. Let them stare. After a few seconds, they couldn't handle it. They looked away. I shrugged and made to move off. There was a loud cough from the man on the stand. I replaced my magic mirror carefully on his tray, gave him a cheesy smile, and went my way. The children followed me. I caught sight of them at the next booth, watching from behind a candy floss stand. They were moving in a huddle, maybe 5 or 6 of them. I couldn't be sure. What did they want? A mugging? If so, why pick me out? There were dozens of better, fatter, richer candidates here. To test this, I cozied up to a very small, wealthy-looking tourist with a giant camera and thick spectacles. If I'd wanted to mug someone, he'd have been top of my list. But When I left him and went on a loop through the crowd, the children followed right along too. Weird and annoying. I didn't want to make a change and fly off. I was too weary. All I wanted was to be left in peace. I still had many hours to go before the dawn. I speeded up. The children did so too. Long before we'd done 3 circuits of the square, I'd had enough. A couple of policemen had watched us beetling around, and they were likely to halt us soon, if only to stop themselves getting dizzy. It was time to go. Whatever the kids were after, I did not want any more attention drawn to me. There was a subway close by. I hot-footed it down the steps, ignored the entrance to the underground, and came up again on the other side of the road, opposite the central square. The kids had vanished. Maybe they were in the subway. Now was my chance. I slipped round a street corner, along past a bookshop, and ducked down an alley. I waited a little there, in the shadows, among the dumper bins. A couple of cars drove past the end of the alley. No one came after me. I allowed myself a brief smile. I thought I'd lost them. I was wrong.